This podcast is brought to you by the North Dakota Petroleum Foundation. From heating our homes and powering our vehicles to cell phones, clothing, and medical equipment, oil and natural gas makes everyday life better. North Dakota Oil and Natural Gas, advancing the possibilities. Learn more at ndpetroleumfoundation.org. Hello, folks. Welcome to another edition of Plain Talk Live. Sorry, we're starting a few minutes late, but Senator Roars was kind enough to make time for us from Bismarck, where he's busy working. It's a very fluid time of year down in Bismarck because there's conference. At this time of year, the House has passed a bunch of bills. The Senate's passed a bunch of bills. They sent each other the bills that each passed, and now they're making changes to the other house's bills. So things go back and forth, and there's a lot of negotiations that got to be happening. And it's an interesting time in Bismarck right now. But joining me is to talk to me about it is Senator Jim Roars, Republican from Fargo, and it's an issue that's got a lot of attention. It's legislation dealing with North Dakota's coal industry. Now we've all been hearing the news about coal plants shutting down in North Dakota and across the nation, and it's Coal Creek Station, North Dakota's largest power plant. Its closure was announced. Now, of course, there's apparently a deal in place for it to be sold. We're waiting for more details of that to emerge. But in the here and now, there's a problem where we have renewable energy that has been heavily promoted by not just the federal government, but also we have mandates and other subsidies at state level, depending on which state you're talking about. And that's creating a marketplace that is driving baseload power off the grid. And by baseload power, I mean nuclear to some extent, but also coal-fired power. Is that good? I mean, at the end of the day, we all expect the power to come on when we flip a switch. And we all expect our utility bills to arrive in our mailboxes with not a lot of surprises. And that's increasingly kind of not happening with reliably anymore. So our state legislature's taking some steps, and here to talk with me about that, of course, is Senator Jim Roars, who, if I can, there we go. I gotta get to the right screen. Senator Roars, thank you so much for your time. Certainly appreciate you coming on and talking about this today.
Yeah, thank you, Rob, for having me. I can't say that you and I have ever had the pleasure of meeting, so I look forward to an in-person meeting someday.
Yeah. Well, I steer clear of political gatherings and stuff like that. I like to keep my distance. I've developed an idiosyncratic way of working, and it's what works for me. But I don't know. Most of the time when I'm not working, I like to just hang out with my kids. That's pretty much.
Well, sometimes being too close can be a curse too, and the fact that you get to be too personable with the people that you may not necessarily agree with. So yeah. I get what you're doing, and I sometimes find myself doing the very same thing.
Well, I will tell you, it doesn't making friends in this business is because eventually I'm gonna have to write about you, and that can be a little awkward sometimes. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. As I look at it, and maybe I'm missing a bill, but I see two big bills that are dealing with this topic area. The first is House Bill 1412, which would create an exemption from the coal conversion tax on coal facilities for 5 years. I think that would be the state giving up in the ballpark of about $43 million in revenue. And then there's House Bill 1452, which would create a state, I don't know what we want to call it. It would be called the Clean Sustainable Energy Authority, and it would be created essentially to find ways to protect North Dakota energy production. So a lot of people out there are saying these are handouts to the coal industry. These are unnecessary. The industry is dying. Why are we doing this? It's a mistake. A lot of opinions about this. Tell us about these bills. Why do we need them?
Boy, I absolutely, Rob. These are two very important bills for North Dakota. 1412 providing some support tax relief is what the federal government has done to everybody but coal. It's given tax advantages for solar and tax advantages for wind. But the power that's been here for the last, 100 years has been that was generated from coal. And all at once now coal is finding itself in a disadvantage because it can't compete because it doesn't get the credits. So by the state providing this credit, we're just helping them compete in the marketplace for the lowest cost energy. So that one's important. The 1452, the clean sustainable energy, again, is to bolster research, because if the government that we currently have in place is successful in killing fossil fuel energy, the world marketplace for energy is in a world of hurt. I mean, we're just not going to be able to compete. However, coal has done a marvelous job of bringing down carbon emissions, which is the biggest concern that we have. And through some of these new research technologies, we're hopeful to be able to not only bring coal or carbon emissions under control, but use those things to our advantage in oil recovery enhancement, for instance, and a multitude of other things. So this is important for North Dakota to be bold right now, because of how much it's going to mean to our state, not only for coal, but for natural gas and oil. Those are fossil fuels, and those are all used for generation of different energy products. So we need to be extremely aggressive at this time, especially with this administration that's in place. So I support both of these bills. I think we as the state of North Dakota should support both of these strategies in a big way. And we are. I think you're going to find at the end of the legislative session, they're both going to get a serious amount of attention. I'll make some comments about the overall budget, but I'll hold for that right
Sure.
now.
Well, obviously
go
that's any decision we make in regard to this is going to have to be in the context of the overall budget, because unlike the federal government in North Dakota, we got to balance the bills. So
Right.
that's just the way it is, and as it should be. A lot of people are saying, listen, Rob, Jim, you're a couple of conservatives, you're a couple of Republicans, and here you are telling us that we got to give breaks to the coal industry like the renewable energy people you got. And you people have been saying, Jim, I guess I don't know maybe your entire history, but you're saying, well, you don't like it when we do that for wind and everything. So how can you guys support it now that it's coal? And I guess that's the question is why are Republicans getting on board with this? Why is it okay for coal but not wind and solar and everything else?
Well, first of all, reliability. Okay, people don't realize how important the reliability factor is, and so today, by creating these subsidies for certain wind-producing enterprises, it puts them in a situation of having the lowest cost power. In other words, they're not competing on the open marketplace for the lowest, most reliable power. Now, solar and wind, we know, do not have reliability. When the wind don't blow and the sun don't shine, you're SOL. Okay, so they can't win that battle. So the only thing they can win is the cheapest price, and the only way they win that is through government subsidies. So if we were to remove those government subsidies, coal would have a huge leg up in the marketplace, right? Because they would be equal to them in cost to produce. Now, the federal government isn't going to do that. So we here at the state have an option to help relieve a little bit of that pressure by removing some of the tax for a short period of time, and let's see how they do. Because we've got two things we've got to fight here. You got to fight the carbon emission, and you got cost to produce. They win the battle every day of the week when it comes to reliability, right? I mean, they can produce power 24/7 at a maximum capacity. Problem is, you intermittently inject their capacity issues with this cheap power, and it doesn't work in the model that they've been working on for the last 50 years, where they've geared up to produce, I can't remember, is it 1,200 megawatts of power that is produced in the state of North Dakota? And now all at once you screw up that whole production cycle with this intermittent power that comes in when the sun shines or when the wind blows. So that's why we feel we as North Dakotans need to take a step forward and try to mitigate that loss. But I'm going to tell you, Rob, that brownout we had and that blackout, that whatever that Texas had going on down there, couldn't have happened at a better time, because it proved to all the people that we know that brownouts are possible.
Yeah.
And brownouts are even possible in our backyard. And we're, the interesting thing is also we think we're the largest, one of the largest energy producers in the world. We're not, or in the United States, we're not. So we don't drive the train, but we follow along. And so,
It's unfortunate that the power outages you're talking had to happen to wake a lot of people up to this, and nobody's happy that it happened. Obviously, it's a terrible thing, but people were hurt and businesses were hurt, and it was awful. But it happened, and I think you're right. Hopefully, it woke a lot of people up to the fact that it is possible for us to screw up our power grid. It is possible for us to shift and be too dependent and not diverse enough in our power. And I say that because everybody thinks, well, that's just an anti-wind argument or an anti-solar argument, and it's not. I want these electrons treated appropriately on the grid. Solar electrons and wind electrons are not really the same thing as coal electrons, because coal, it's like you put coal in one side of a plant and it pushes out electricity out the other side. Wind, you got to hope the wind's blowing. Solar, you got to hope the sun's shining. We can't control the weather, as we all know, as much as we try to control things like climate change with tax policy, which might be a mark of the hubris of mankind. We can't control the weather. So this is where we're at. What frustrates me is a lot of people saying, well, this is just the market at work. Aren't you guys free market? It's just the market at work. And it's not. The government put the government above North Dakota, right? I mean, the big kahuna in this is the production tax credit, which is policy that is not set in the state of North Dakota. Policy that gets made above us is impacting energy in our state and is impacting baseload energy in our state. And it shouldn't be the number one consideration, but it should be a consideration. But the economy too. I mean, those coal communities in the central part of North Dakota, all of those coal workers, all those miners, the people who work, men and women who work at the plant, the men and women who work in the mine, it's going to impact them too, for no good reason, right? I mean, if coal plants were closing because coal's doesn't work anymore, right? We figured out just a better way of doing it, then okay, life goes on, and it's what's the term for it? The creative destruction of the free market. I could make my peace with that. I would still be sad to see the way some of those communities would be impacted, but so it goes. My problem is politics is doing this to us. And the way I look at these two bills, 1452 and 1412, is this is a way of North Dakota, unfortunately, having to react to some of the political realities that are foisted on us from other states and the federal government.
And you're absolutely right, Rob. I mean, this is, we're reacting to policy that's been generated at the federal government for the last 15 years, right? And so we're kind of up against our back is up against the wall in the fact that we need to fight back now, or coal's going to disappear in the next 10 years. That's not going to be good. Not going to be good for North Dakota. It's not going to be good for the nation when you take away one of the major electrical generation opportunities. And can it be replaced with gas? Maybe, but gas is a fossil fuel too. It will be under attack in the next 10 years. So, we really need to, what we think we need to do is level the playing field so all of these energy sources can play in the same sandbox without interference from the government, period. Okay. Yeah. And that's what we got to do. That's what we're hopeful to do. Yes, these bills here, one of them is to generate research. One of them is to create some tax relief. They're both good. They're both good for North Dakota, and we need to move forward with them.
So House Bill 1412, like I said, pretty straightforward. It's an exemption from the state's coal conversion tax for 5 years. And I should say the price tag is about almost $43 million. That's for the coming biennium, the 2-year 2021-23 biennium. Obviously, there would be additional in the full 5-year window the cost. And I don't like to say that, because allowing people to keep their own money, whether it's a company or an individual, I have a hard time treating that like it's the government spending money or something. We're just not taking their money for a while, and I
Well,
think that's an important distinction.
Rob, you're exactly right. But here's the other thing: keep it in perspective. Look at what the coal industry generates for the state of North Dakota. Look at their economic value proposition, and that 43 million looks pretty small.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. When you start thinking about those thousands of workers, all those communities, I mean, listen, schools are going to close. I mean, if Coal Creek Station, just as one example, if Coal Creek Station goes under, entire communities are going to become ghost towns.
Yeah.
That's just reality.
Yeah.
So anyway, that bill's straightforward. The other one, 1452. And everybody I talk to about this thinks the name is too cute. The Clean Sustainable Energy Authority. They think that's too cute by half because you're basically talking about funding research for the coal industry. And I mean, I think that's fair. I don't want to say it's fair. It's pretty clear we're borrowing some verbiage from our environmentalist friends when we're naming this authority. Is that I think there are some people who got a bad taste in their mouth about this bill because they felt the language was a little bit misleading.
I think, yes. I will tell you, when I heard it the first time, I was like, what's this about? You know, you're exactly right. Clean, sustainable energy. But the more you study the value proposition of sustainable, the more you realize that this is a big issue that needs to be explored to the nth degree because of what happened in Texas. It was a classic example about sustainable power. Texas drew the most perfect description of what can happen when you put too much money into non-renewables. You know, so here they thought they were as sassy as could be. They had all the power they ever needed until it got cold. And guess what? They couldn't pipe enough electrons into that state to take care of their demand because 30% of their energy is produced from non-renewables, right? So here we proved it. But okay, going back to this bill right here, clean, sustainable energy. I think the purpose for the name is to try to emphasize the importance of reliability, without a doubt. Whatever we study, we want to, and I'm going to tell you, Tundra, the Tundra project is at the top of the list right now. But there's a host of other research opportunities that are taking place as it relates to clean energy, not necessarily sustainable energy, that can greatly enhance its appeal to the environmentalist, even. Run
us through some of what the Clean Sustainable Energy Authority. How does it work, and what's it going to be funding?
Well, I wish I had. I do have right here. If you go to the EERC in Grand Forks, a lot of what we're developing, I wish I've got it right here, this clean, sustainable research benefiting the state of North Dakota. See if I can whip through and answer that question. Coal utilization and management, carbon management, oil and gas development, alternative fuels and renewable energy, energy through water. Those are all things that the EERC is working on, developing new strategies for as to how they can continue to produce more clean electricity through the use of all different things like coal, gas, hydro, nuclear, solar, all the different energy sources they're researching right now to see how they can do it on their own and how they can do it together. And I'm not doing a really good job of answering your question, I think, Rob. But
in some ways, I think it's I wrote a column a while ago making the point that today's coal is not your grandfather's coal, which is to say that people sometimes think of coal plants as these static things. We built them however many decades ago, and they're still just operating the same way. And what that point of view ignores is the fact that we've been implementing new technology and new techniques all the time to make coal cleaner than it was. We have solved issues with sulfur. We have solved issues with mercury. We have done a lot of this stuff. Even the mining of coal. If you look at our reclamation process and the oversight that gets here in the state of North Dakota runs its own process. And the federal government routinely inspects it and signs off on it. It works wonderfully. And so I think sometimes people have this idea of coal because they see it in movies or they read about it in books, and it's like all these coal plants are dirty and they're awful, and they're thinking of like these Victorian era smoke belchers, and it's just not true anymore. And I think the point is we have this abundant resource. Everybody tells me all the time there's like 800 years worth of coal under North Dakota, centuries worth. If we have those resources, why not only continue to use them, but fund ways to figure out how to use it better so that we can continue to rely on this resource well into the future?
Rob, I mentioned a Project Tundra. There's also the Red River Trails doing a project right now on the ethanol. How can the ethanol be blended to make more sustainable energy source? There's concept control.
Yeah, I think that's the point. I mean, there's a lot of projects, some of which are in the here and now, which would be things like Project Tundra. I mean, that's a very real project. That's for people who maybe don't know. That's a carbon capture project where we're talking about capturing and sequestering the carbon that a facility like coal plants work. Although once the technology is perfected, it wouldn't necessarily just apply to coal plants either. It would have other implications as well. But there's a lot of things like that. But also, we may be funding things that aren't even on our radar yet, that maybe some big brain scientist is aware of and it hasn't been reported on yet, or maybe it's not ready. But it could be something that we don't even know about yet. I mean, that's the great thing about technology and science. It's always coming up with breakthroughs that could push us forward. And Jim, that's one of the things that really frustrates me about this debate is we're always hearing people say, well, follow the science, believe in the science. Well, here we're literally trying to fund science to figure out how to use an abundant resource even better, and people are against it. And that doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, no, Rob, I'd ask you the question, are people against it? I'm not hearing a lot of pushback on doing this kind of research. We're getting a lot of support for this bill, which again, when we met, 70 days or 60 days ago, and this came up, we were like, what's the end game here? Everybody felt that this was for coal. And I think you're placing the sustainable research is not necessarily 100% coal. There's all kinds of other energy research things that they're doing with storage, with wind turbine, recycling of wind turbines.
That's a good point.
There's all kinds of other stuff, and they're even finding graphite. They're doing graphite research for the graphite that is extracted out of the coal development process. So there's a lot of things, and I think what's happened is that no one gives enough credit to all of the different value propositions that come out of the coal industry. And hopefully through this research, we can highlight some of those spin-off benefits that might appear to be minor, but yet when you look at decades of it, it's not minor anymore. So I just think that it's worth our time to look at this sustainable. Now, I will tell you that the testimony that has come resulting this bill has taken this bill from literally 15 million to 45-ish today. Depends on where the budget ends up, but it's built momentum in the legislature as the conversations have gone on to the point where the support for it has grown by those dollars.
There are people who have spoken out against it. One, Scott Skokos, he's the executive director of the Dakota Resource Council. He's quoted extensively in a news article that I'm reading. Some of the things he's saying is that the Clean Sustainable Energy Authority, which is what we're talking about, the research bill, this is what he says about it. He says, I quote, It actually doesn't have any representation from renewables or any other innovative technology like batteries. If we're going to talk about clean, sustainable energy, we have to have actual clean, sustainable energy at the table. So that's his complaint about the bill. How do you respond to that?
I think it's there. He's just not acknowledging it. I know it's part of what we were given. That battery or storage was definitely a part of the mission. And so for him to say that there's nobody there, I think what he's referring to is if you looked at the committee, which is this clean sustainable committee. I don't have it in front of me right now, but that was a host of people. I mean, like a dozen or more people. Maybe I think it was 18 people representing different industries. Do you have that? Do you have that in front of you?
I don't have it right in front of me, no.
I should. If you don't mind, I'll look while you continue to talk. But I think that committee consists of quite a large contingent of industries.
Yeah, looking at it for now, I'm trying to find it as well. But again, I think the problem here is it's everybody wants to take a very narrow view, and everybody wants to focus on what I want my particular industry to be the industry that benefits and not the other person's industry. And I don't think that's what this is about. And a lot of times my commentary on a lot of this gets branded as, well, you're just pro-coal or you're just anti-wind. Yeah. And that's not really it. I want the mechanisms of the marketplace, which takes into account the science, what works, what doesn't work, the market realities. We need to have sustainable energy. We need to have affordable energy. It takes into account all of that. I want those things to dictate where we're going, not whoever hired the most lobbyists or whoever is favored by Hollywood activists, giving their speeches during award ceremonies. That's what I want to drive our energy policy. I'm not against wind. I'm not against solar. I'm not against hydroelectric or any of these other things per se. I just want what works and what's appropriate and what's going to meet all of our society's expectations from the electrical grid. That's what I want.
And Rob, you couldn't have said it better, I think, than the majority of the legislators believe that what we want energy of all kinds, and we want to be a mega energy exporter. We've got the resources here. Why don't we take advantage of them and develop every one of the energy resources, but they all have to work together. And we don't have them all working together today. Okay. And so once we get to that point, and then the next, our next hurdle, we already know what our next hurdle is. Our next hurdle is going to be getting the power out of here, getting the pipelines, not the pipelines,
transmission
lines to get the power out of here. And so, between our coal, our oil, our gas, our wind, look at the resources we have. And now that they're actually developing solar farms here in North Dakota that makes sense. There's one going in by Abercrombie, North Dakota. It's 250 megawatts of power. And, that's just the first one of potentially many of these that are proven technology to work here in the upper, the upper states. So just think about what North Dakota can be to the world energy needs if we continue to develop all of these in concert rather than trying one to kill the other.
But again, the problem is we're developing wind energy and we're doing it on incentives that are put in place by the government. And I worry all the time when government starts trying to provide incentives to pave our way to a certain outcome that we create bubbles. We saw it with in higher education, where the government wants everybody to go to college, and so we turned student loans into a sort of almost an entitlement. If you want a student loan, you can get a student loan, and everybody went to college. And what happened to the price of higher education? It went through the roof. We wanted people to own homes, right? So the government came in and they made easy money loans a thing, and then pretty soon we had a subprime mortgage market, and we all know how that ended. And I worry that the government has come in and they have put their finger on the scale of energy development. And now we have a lot of energy developers who are they are choosing to develop certain types of energy in order to capture government subsidies, and not necessarily because that's what the government needs. That's what I worry about every day. That's what terrified me about those blackouts over this winter. I worry that we've created a bubble. Does that worry you too?
Absolutely. You're spot on, Rob. Geez, that's what we're worried about, and that's what's happened already in this coal industry because there's been so damn many subsidies for other than coal. Coal can't compete in the marketplace, and it's not about pollution anymore. There was a time when pollution was a concern. They've cleaned up those to the point where they meet all the emission standards or exceed. So why are we continuing to create incentives for people to take out the most reliable source of energy support that we've got? Why are we doing that? So yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, it concerns us every day when we see policy coming out of Washington, D.C. And what do they even care about us in North Dakota? And I have to think that the answer is probably no. But
we're coming down to the stretch of the legislature. You made reference to this before. What's the budget situation going to be like? I mean, how many more changes are we going to see to these bills to get passed? Because that's the thing is when it always comes down to the budget, right? And it's always about fitting what we want to spend in with what we can spend. Are we going to see any more trimming? How does that situation look?
well, the budget was really three different bills. There's a streaming bill. The Buy North Dakota bill, and then there was the bonding bill. The bonding bill just got pushed out of the Senate in a very unusual way. Did you get updated last week?
I don't think I did. No.
So what happened is the bonding bill was supposed to be a big tool for negotiations, and the House pushed it out at $860 million, and the Senate wanted about 1.3 million dollars of items in the bonding bill. Do I need to back up and talk about the bonding bill and what its strategy is?
Yeah. Why don't you a little bit for our
Okay,
audience?
so the bonding bill was to take a small percentage of the earnings, not the principal, of the legacy funds, and use those to pay back bonds that could be sold so we could utilize those monies today for infrastructure projects that would help our taxpayers long term with today's dollars. Okay, so if whatever we buy today, flood protection, for instance, is one. It's going to cost us a lot less to do that today than if we wait for 7 or 6 more years to get the money put in the bank, right? So by bonding it, we can get the lowest interest rates available, which we're in the current marketplace, that's where we're at. And we can get the best price available, and we will pay for them with the percentage of the future legacy earnings. So that being said, we believe that's a good strategy. It's a good business move. You and I would do that in our businesses every day. We do it when we buy real estate.
It's leveraging your capital, right? And that's all it
Leveraging
is.
your assets. That's
Yeah.
right. We do it every day in our business world. So we were going to do that. The House came with this conservative approach. We had a more generous approach. Came down to it. The Senate said, you know what? If we accept the bonding bill that came out of the House as it is, there's no more negotiating. So our core project, the Fargo diversion, the Minot water diversion project, the Red River Valley or the Central North Dakota water supply project, and the project at NDSU, and one other project, I'm forgetting the name right now, but those projects were now done, safe, put in the back room, forget about them. And we could focus on all the other things in the other bills, the streaming bill and the Buy North Dakota bill. So that's what we've done. We did that last week. So it takes basically $800 million and said, we're done with that. Now let's focus on what's left. But and so now as those pieces are coming together, that's where you're probably looking at this 1452 is in there. Is it going to stay where it's at? Is it going to get negotiated? No, it goes to the sausage grinder now and gets all reevaluated. So that's what's happening. I just want to say one thing about the Buy North Dakota bill. I just love that bill. Our investment team invests a lot of money through our investment strategies. They do a phenomenal job. Their average rate of return is like 9.5%. That is fantastic. You can look at any investment firm in the world and they don't produce those kind of results. Our team is doing that. But there's also a component of that they invest in some infrastructure things out of the state of North Dakota that give them a much, much less rate of return. We asked, if you're going to do that, let's take a percentage of that and invest that in North Dakota infrastructure at a lesser rate, at a 2% rate of return, whatever. That got huge traction. That's going to come through in good shape. So
I really liked that bill. Everybody probably saw I was writing about it pretty extensively. I really liked it, and the reason why is the legacy fund is not a pension fund. And so maximizing returns to it, while a good thing, certainly, is not necessarily priority number one. It needs to be a priority. It is not the priority. We created the legacy fund for North Dakota's legacy. And if we could promote that legacy by investing in North Dakota, because if we essentially invest some of the legacy fund in bonds to ourselves, we can do that quicker. Right? That means we can build infrastructure in North Dakota faster. We can knock off some of, when you have to go through middlemen or whatever, we can knock off some of the bonding costs. We can make, so essentially when our communities are growing, right, and when we got to build a new sewage plant. I mean, listen, as public policy, there's nothing sexy about this stuff. We're talking about building sewage plants. We're talking about building roads. We're talking about building water lines. Those are all things that nobody thinks about until they're not working right. So I understand it's not sexy politics, but it is such a game changer for our state. And also, by the way, some of the investment in our state is going to be making capital available for businesses that want to move here, which is a historic challenge that businesses in our state have faced going back to statehood. It has always been a struggle to attract capital to the state of North Dakota. Somebody is saying, hey, I want to start up a new business here and I want people to invest. Finding those people who want to invest in businesses in North Dakota has been hard. They exist, don't get me wrong. It's always been a small community, and it's always been tough. And this bill takes our legacy fund, our giant pot of money that we've created from tax revenues from the oil industry. We have created the legacy fund, and we're going to leverage it without really even spending it. We're going to leverage it because these are going to be investments, right? There's an expectation that all this stuff gets paid back. You lend some money to a city so they can build a water sewage plant. They're going to pay it back. You loan some money out to a business, to give them some seed money to start their business. You invest in that business. They're going to pay it back, right? That's the whole point. So the legacy fund still continues to earn interest on all of these investments. It's just the investments are in North Dakota. What a great thing.
It is, Rob. Keep in mind, one of the things that you just tapped on there, and that I think the public needs to be aware of, is that when you're helping these communities build infrastructure at a reduced rate because their financing is lower than it has been, you're saving money in every taxpayer in that district. Okay, so it's not like the communities are getting rich or the state's getting rich. It literally reduces the cost of doing business for the people that live in those communities. So drill it down to where it really meets, where the rubber meets the road, and that's the taxpayer, because you're going to pay the going rate for sewer, water, and roads, right? I mean, you don't get to negotiate a lower price. However, if we can help you finance them at a lower price, you save as a taxpayer. The flip side of that coin is what you also just talked about, and that's what we call the LIFT bill. That's where we put $15 million the last biennium to help startup businesses launch their business into a reality, take a concept to completion. And that proved to be hugely successful. We would like to see that funded this time at $40 million. We'll see where that ends up. I think it's on the docket right now for $40 million. And Then I'll spin on one more. Can I do one more for you?
Absolutely.
Okay, and then the next one is the research money. The research money for the two land grant institutions has now been it's at about $50 million. It's been everywhere from $10 million to $15 million. That also creates mega opportunities for North Dakota down the road as it relates to new research and new technologies. Those are important. The bill now requires that 10% of that money goes to the other 9 institutions.
Yeah.
And 40/40 goes to
I will. I will tell you, because I went to the meeting. I remember before the last session when they were pitching it, they came to a meeting out here, and it was the UND prep, Mark Kennedy at the time from University of North Dakota, Dean Bershani from NDSU. They came to a meeting. I went to a meeting here in Minot, and it was funny because I think it was the Valley Prosperity Partnership, right? And then it was the two big research institutions, and they're out here in Minot talking about how we should send more money to the Red River Valley. And I understand the argument they're making, the research innovations or whatever, that that could benefit the whole state. And I guess that makes sense. One tough thing from out west here is like, well, okay, a lot of that revenue that you want is being generated out here, and it seems like a lot of it just kind of flows into the valley, which I realize you're from Fargo, so maybe you have a different view of this. Sometimes the feeling out west is, and I'm sure you hear it, is oh great, we're gonna dump more money on NDSU and UND. That's super.
Yes. Just keep in mind, a lot of the research projects are done in conjunction with all of these other schools, specifically Dickinson and Minot.
That's true.
And so they are. However, the two land grant universities are on the east, and I can't help that.
Yeah. No. And my point obviously is I'm glad there's been some consideration to the other, and obviously I'm somebody, and this is a debate for a whole other show. I kind of feel like we have too many institutions, and we ought to look at, do we need all of these across the whole state? I don't know, but it's I was glad that if we're going to have these other institutions, maybe there's a couple of crumbs left, couple slices of the pie left for them as well. Senator Roars, thank you so much for your time. Certainly appreciate you coming on. Your first live stream show.
Yeah.
So these have been a lot of fun trying to grow the audience for them. It's a new thing for Forum Communications. It's a new thing for me, and I'm still dealing with some technical glitches getting used to. I'm used to doing talk radio, right? But talk radio doesn't have the component where you have the audience staring you in the face the whole time. So I must spend most of my time trying not to pick my nose while I'm on camera. But Senator Roars, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. Good luck the rest of the session.
It was fun. Nice to have met you, Rob. We'll look forward to meeting you in person one day.
Thank you.
You bet. Bye.